if I'm rooting and I'm the Nets, then I'm rooting for Boston. All right, Boston is in free fall. They've lost 5 of their last 6. They've lost 10 of their last 15. Jaylen Brown is out. There's problems there. And Brooklyn swept them. I know the regular season records don't matter that much, but they swept them in 3 games in the regular season. Washington beat Brooklyn in the regular season. Washington is rolling. They won 17 of their last 23. Russell Westbrook is playing some of the best basketball of his career. You know, he's actually, his shot selection is better. His decision-making looks like it's better. You know he'd be hyped up to beat Kevin Durant. And his athleticism, his ferocity, his intensity, it's an X factor. Again, they wouldn't beat Brooklyn, but they could make it tougher than you need it to be in the first round just because Westbrook throws teams off with his abandon that he plays with. And so if I'm the Nets, I definitely would rather see Boston than Washington.
It pains me to have to agree with you, Chris Broussard, but I do agree with you on this. And in fact, maybe they won't beat Brooklyn in a series, but they will stretch it out. They will make it uncomfortable. You think about, you're talking about better shot selections and just the speed that Russell Westbrook is playing at. Well, Bradley Beal has really, really transitioned into being an elite basketball player and leader and face for this Zards team. And let me tell you something. That is a tremendous duo. So, yeah, of course you want to go against the Celtics for all the reasons you just stated. And again, going back to this Washington Wizards team, any team that sees them right now, because of that continuity and that belief, are going to have problems. And think about this. There is a familiarity with these guys going into this series if it is Washington versus Brooklyn. All 3 of these dudes were in OKC together. Just as a reminder, if anybody out there may have forgot, I know you probably didn't, but Russell Westbrook is not going to come into this game with a lack of knowledge of how you play against KD or James Harden. So to me, that familiarity will make this an even more competitive matchup because there's not going to be any fear. There's going to be great preparation. Listen, I left Washington and went to New York. When I left, I had all the scouting report and inside knowledge of what we needed to do to prepare for the Washington football team going into that game. If you don't think for 2 seconds that you have an intimacy and understanding of your former team and your teammates and even the coaching staff, which this isn't that case here, different team, different coach, but the familiarity that Russell Westbrook brings into this matchup would present problems and issues for this Brooklyn Nets team. You want the Celtics.
Well, and this, it'd be a different story, obviously, if Jaylen Brown wasn't hurt, but he is. And so the Celtics going to be very fortunate just to win either of these play-in games. But Wilds, I have a feeling which direction you're going to lean, given the fact that you named one of your sons after Russell Westbrook. But speaking of those wonderful sons of yours, do you ever play like the old school Nintendo games with them, like Mario, like the old original Mario games that we grew up playing? Do you ever
blow on the cassette?
So I think this is an analogy that will resonate with people. And this is how I view the NBA playoffs. So you start, if you're right now the Sixers and the Nets, you are starting a level with your big, you have the fireball, and you have the little star that makes you invincible, right? And you are trying to get to the final boss, Bowser, with as many of those powers possible. Not just make it there, but to make it there fully formed. And because the Nets are the 2 seed, if they get the Wizards, you know what the Wizards will do in round 1 by taking a game or 2 off them? Now the star's gone. Okay, I still got my firepower, though. And then you play Giannis, and maybe you beat them. But now all of a sudden, he drops you down a level, and now you're just big. You don't have any special powers. And then you get Philly, and maybe you beat them. And if you do, though, now you're just the little guy. You got no extra lives left, and you're up against Bowser in the finals. meaning the Lakers. Meanwhile, the Sixers Wilds in round 1 are going to sweep whomever they play. They're still going to be invincible. Round 2, now if they get the Knicks, I think the Knicks could take a chunk out of them. But they likely will get the Hawks. They'll be invincible through that too. They will go into their series against the Nets, if that is who they're playing, or against the Bucks, still with the firepower, big, all of the above. And that's why I think tonight's game oddly matters, Wilds, for Brooklyn's championship hopes. Because you want as little wear and tear on you possible as you get to the teams who can actually beat you. I know it was a convoluted analogy, but I think it made sense.
No, you got there.
It's not that I think the Wizards have any chance of actually beating Brooklyn in a series, but they have a much better chance of making it a slightly longer series, which makes it more likely the Bucks series is harder. And if Brooklyn's goal is championship or bust, I think they are, 4%, 5% more likely to win the title if the Celtics win tonight, who they can dispatch of in 4 games.
Yep. Okay. If that happens, and Jenna, I'm going to ask you here to take out your earpiece, please. Yeah, no, you have to take it out because you're not going to be able to handle it. I'm sorry.
I'm legit gonna take it out. I don't want to hear any Danny Ainge slander. So
you
be
should,
careful.
honestly. It's going to be bad. And Broussard, I will come to you. Let's suppose the Celtics win. I will root for the Celtics. If the Nets dispatch of the Celtics, all of this Danny Ainge fleeced Billy King. Oh, look what we got. This treasure trove of draft picks. They gave us the war chest. Ha, ha, ha. We are back. It's going to be the second coming of great Celtics dynasties. We won a championship, and I'm a Celtic, 2008. If the Nets get a championship and dispatch of the Celtics in the process, then we have to rewrite NBA history. The idea that Danny Ainge did such a wonderful job fleecing the Nets, because the Nets are back on top of the mountain and the Celtics are somehow back to where they started. They've just been in neutral. Does it cost Danny Ainge's job? I don't know. I don't like calling for guys' jobs, and I know he's got a good relationship with everybody in the organization. But there has to be some serious looking at the Celtics organization from top to bottom if you've staked your reputation on fleecing the Nets and then the Nets dispatch you several years later.
Well, Wilds, I don't think it changes the history. He did fleece the Nets. There's no doubt about it. But what it'll show is that since he fleeced the Nets, he hasn't done a good job with it. He has not maximized it. He's not taking advantage of what he did to the Nets, and the Nets came back and resurrected themselves. So I'm going to say this to Nick quickly. I hear what you say, Nick, and that's a good point you made about the Nets and a tough road to the finals. But they need some adversity. You know, they need those three guys together, Harden, Kyrie, and you know what I'm saying? Like, they do need a rough patch here and there to show that they got to get some stops together. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, because there's a point to be made for what you said. But if their first bit of adversity, if the first time they get punched in the mouth is Milwaukee, in Game 6 or Philadelphia.
It could be too late.
It could be, it could be tough. So it might help them if they have a tough series with Washington early on.
Well, then everyone should be rooting for the Wizards tonight, including Danny Ainge, because to Wild's point, if the Celtics lose tonight, but then beat Charlotte or Indiana, and they end up, the 8 seed and playing Philly, that narrative is not going on for 2 weeks. That narrative Wild's talking about is only happening if it's a Celtics-Nets series. So, Jenna, you should be rooting for the Celtics to lose tonight and then win on Thursday. Yep. That way they're in the playoffs. Oh, okay, Jenna can't hear. Don't worry about it. Jenna, we're going to break. Just go ahead and take us to break.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.